an honor earned in the crucible of conflict, a symbol of sacrifice worn with pride. What happens when that very symbol is challenged, not on the battlefield, but in a hall of justice? Imagine a decorated general, a woman who has dedicated her life to her country, standing before a judge who sees not her service, but an opportunity to assert his authority in the most demeaning way possible. The demand is simple, yet unthinkable: remove the medal. The silence that follows is thick with tension, the air crackling with the impending collision of honor and ego. In that moment, a career hangs in the balance, and the scales of justice are about to be weighed not by evidence, but by an act of defiance that will ripple far beyond the four walls of the courtroom. What would you do? How does a lifetime of command and discipline prepare someone for a battle they never saw coming? Stick with us as we unravel the moments that led to this showdown, the explosive aftermath, and the devastating choice that would redefine a legacy. The air in the courtroom was stale, heavy with the unspoken anxieties of a dozen lives hanging in the balance. It was a place where futures were decided, where the gavel's fall could shatter a world, and into this arena of hushed whispers and nervous glances walked Brigadier General Anaya Sharma. She wasn't there as a defendant, nor as a plaintiff. She was there to offer a character witness statement for a young sergeant from her former command, a good soldier who had made a foolish character mistake. General Sharma believed in second chances, a philosophy she had owned over 30 years of service, from the dusty plains of Kandahar to the polished corridors of the Pentagon. She moved with a quiet confidence, her uniform immaculate, each ribbon and medal on her chest a silent testament to a life lived in service to her nation. Among them, nestled just above the others, was the Distinguished Service Medal, an honor she had received for her strategic brilliance during a covert operation that had saved countless lives. It was a piece of her history, a part of her soul forged in the fires of duty. She expected to speak for 5 minutes, to lend her voice and her reputation to a young man she believed deserved another shot. She did not expect the cold, dismissive gaze of Judge Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a man who reveled in the petty tyrannies of his position. He saw his courtroom as his kingdom, and all who entered as his subjects. From his elevated bench, he looked down not with the impartial eyes of justice, but with the jaded squint of a man who had seen too much of humanity's failings and had long since lost any empathy. He was known for his sharp tongue and his rigid adherence to an unwritten code of courtroom etiquette that often seemed to shift with his mood. As General Sharma took her place at the witness stand, raising her right hand to be sworn in, Thorne's eyes narrowed, not on her face, but on the glint of metal on her chest. He let her take the oath, his silence a calculated pause designed to unnerve. Then, as she settled into the chair, he leaned forward, his voice cutting through the silence like a shard of glass. "General," he began, the title laced with a faint, almost imperceptible sneer. "Before we proceed, I must address the matter of your ornamentation." A ripple of confusion went through the few spectators. Sharma's expression remained placid, a mask of professional composure, though a flicker of bewilderment registered in her eyes. She had worn her uniform in countless official settings, including other courtrooms, and never had it been an issue. "Your Honor," she asked, her tone even and respectful.
"That medal?"
Thorne said, gesturing with a flick of his pen. "The large one," I find it to be a distraction. It is not appropriate for these proceedings. You will remove it." The demand hung in the air, audacious and unprecedented. The court stenographer's fingers froze over her keys. The young sergeant at the defendant's table looked up, his own troubles momentarily forgotten in the face of this stunning breach of protocol. General Sharma's mind, trained to assess threats and formulate responses in fractions of a second, went into overdrive. This wasn't a legal objection. It was a power play. Thorne was testing her, attempting to strip her of her dignity before she had even spoken a word. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, a visceral reaction she hadn't felt since her early days at the academy. To comply would be to capitulate to an insult, not just to herself, but to every man and woman who had ever worn the uniform. To refuse would be to defy a direct order from a sitting judge, an act that could have serious, career-ending consequences. Her 30 years of service, her impeccable record, all of it could be jeopardized by her next words. The silence stretched, each tick of the courtroom clock a hammer blow against the anvil of her decision. Judge Thorne leaned back, a smug, self-satisfied look creeping onto his face. He believed he had her trapped. He was about to learn that a true general's strength isn't just in leading a charge, but in holding the line, no matter the cost. The command, so alien and offensive, echoed in the chamber, a direct challenge to the very core of General Anaya Sharma's identity. 30 years of discipline, of saluting and saying, "Yes, sir," warred with a lifetime of earning the right to wear that medal. Her mind raced through the implications. Complying meant diminishing the honor it represented, not just for her, but for all who had served. It would be a public submission to a petty tyrant, a silent admission that the symbol of her sacrifice was mere ornamentation. Refusing meant open defiance, contempt of court, and the very real possibility of immediate incarceration. It would be a spectacular, career-immolating act of principle. Every eye in the room was on her, waiting. The young sergeant she was there to defend watched with a look of horror, realizing her act of support was turning into a personal crucifixion. Sharma's gaze remained locked on Judge Thorne, her expression unreadable, a calm sea over a churning abyss. She thought of the faces of the soldiers she had led, the ones who had trusted her with their lives. She thought of the night that earned her the Distinguished Service Medal, the impossible decisions, the weight of command that had settled permanently into her soul. That medal wasn't a piece of jewelry. It was a scar, a memory, a promise. To remove it would be to sever a part of herself. Slowly, deliberately, she drew a breath. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "With all due respect, this is my uniform. The regulations of the United States Army authorize me to wear it as you see it. This medal is not an ornament. It is an honor bestowed upon me by a grateful nation for service rendered. I will not be removing it." The words, spoken with quiet finality, were a thunderclap in the silent room. A gasp rippled through the spectators. The prosecutor, a man accustomed to courtroom drama, looked as though he had been slapped. Judge Thorne's face, which had been a mask of smug superiority, began to transform. A dark flush crept up his neck, his eyes narrowing into furious slits. He had expected a reluctant acquiescence, perhaps a mumbled protest. He had not expected this. He had not expected a will of iron to match his own. "General," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous, I am the authority in this courtroom. My order is not a suggestion. I find your refusal to be an act of contempt. I will give you one more opportunity to comply before I have you removed and held in custody." He gestured to the two bailiffs standing by the wall, their expressions a mixture of shock and reluctance. This was the precipice. The moment where a career, once a soaring eagle, could be sent plummeting to the earth. Sharma knew the consequences. A contempt charge would be a black mark on her pristine record, a stain that could never be fully erased. It would be a weapon her detractors in the Pentagon, those who had always resented her rapid rise, could use against her. Promotions would vanish, prestigious assignments would be given to others. The career she had built with sweat, blood, and sacrifice would be irrevocably damaged. And for what? For a piece of metal? But it was never just a piece of metal. It was a stand against the abuse of power. It was a lesson for the young sergeant watching, a lesson that some things, like honor and dignity, are worth fighting for, even when the cost is immense. She looked from Thorne's enraged face to the young man she had come to support, and her resolve hardened. She would not teach him that a bully on a bench could strip a soldier of their honor. "Your Honor," she stated, her voice ringing with a clarity that seemed to push back against the oppressive atmosphere of the room, "I understand your position. And I stand by mine." With that, she placed her hands, palms down, on the polished wood of the witness stand, a gesture of finality, of acceptance of what was to come. The silent showdown was over. The war had just begun. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Judge Thorne, his face a thunderous mask of fury, slammed his gavel down with a crack that made everyone flinch. "Bailiffs, take the general into custody for contempt of court," he roared. The two officers, their faces etched with discomfort, moved towards the witness stand. There was a moment of surreal hesitation as they approached the one-star general. In their world, generals gave orders. They didn't receive them from courtroom bailiffs, but the judge's command was absolute. With a quiet apology, they escorted a stoic and unresisting General Sharma from the courtroom. The image was jarring, a perversion of the natural order of things, a decorated military leader being led away like a common criminal, her only crime an unwavering commitment to her own hard-won honor. The young sergeant she had come to defend could only watch, his face a canvas of disbelief and guilt. Her stand in his defense had cost her her freedom and, as he would soon learn, her career. The news spread through the courthouse like a wildfire, then leaped to the local news, and from there, exploded onto the national stage. A sitting judge jailing a general for wearing a medal was a story that needed no embellishment. The Pentagon was thrown into a state of controlled chaos. The Public Affairs Office was inundated with calls from reporters. Behind closed doors, high-level meetings were convened. The situation was a public relations nightmare. On one hand, the military prides itself on respect for civilian authority. On the other, the image of a general being punished for wearing her uniform was anathema to the institution. Privately, many of her superiors were furious with Thorne, but they were also displeased with Sharma. In their view, she had allowed a minor, albeit insulting, situation to escalate into a full-blown crisis. She should have been more pragmatic, they murmured. She should have found a way to de-escalate, to comply without truly capitulating. This was the unwritten rule of the upper echelons: don't make waves. Sharma had just unleashed a tsunami. She was released after a few hours, the contempt charge officially logged. But the damage was done. When she returned to her duties at the Pentagon, the atmosphere was different. The respectful greetings were still there, but they were now tinged with a new, unwelcome element: pity. Her colleagues saw her not as a hero of principle, but as a casualty of her own stubbornness. The career she had so meticulously built began to crumble, not in a sudden collapse, but in a slow, agonizing erosion. A long, planned promotion to Major General was indefinitely postponed. Her name was quietly removed from consideration for a prestigious command in Europe. She was reassigned to a desk job, a bureaucratic backwater where her strategic acumen would be wasted on reviewing procurement contracts. The message was clear. She was being sidelined. Her stand in the courtroom had marked her as unpredictable, a maverick who could not be trusted to play the political games necessary for advancement at the highest levels. The very qualities that had made her a brilliant commander on the battlefield. Her decisiveness, her unwavering commitment to her principles, were now seen as liabilities in the polished, risk-averse world of the Pentagon's senior leadership. Judge Thorne, for his part, faced a wave of public condemnation, but he weathered the storm. A judicial review board issued a mild reprimand for his lack of judicial temperament, a slap on the wrist that did nothing to alter his power. He remained on the bench, a symbol of the unyielding, often unaccountable, power of the judiciary. General Sharma, however, paid the ultimate professional price. Her career, once on a trajectory to the highest echelons of the military, had hit a granite wall. The momentum was gone. The bright future had been extinguished. All because she refused to remove a symbol of a promise she had made to herself and her country, a promise to serve with honor, no matter the cost. The years that followed were a quiet winter for Anaya Sharma. The vibrant, decisive general who had once commanded thousands was now navigating the sterile, beige corridors of a forgotten Pentagon department. The reassignment was, in essence, a gilded cage. She retained her rank and her salary, but her influence, her purpose, had been stripped away. Her days were filled with administrative tasks, a slow drip of bureaucratic minutiae that felt like a punishment designed by a committee. The strategic mind that had once outmaneuvered enemy forces was now tasked with untangling logistical knots that held little meaning. She was a ghost haunting the halls of her own career, a living reminder of the institution's unwritten rule: the nail that sticks up will be hammered down. The invitations to high-level strategy sessions dried up. Junior officers who had once sought her mentorship now averted their eyes, unsure how to interact with a general who was both a legend and a pariah. The incident with Judge Thorne had become a cautionary tale whispered in the mess halls and private clubs. Principle is a luxury the ambitious cannot afford. Yet, something unexpected began to happen outside the suffocating confines of the Pentagon. Her story, which had been a flash in the pan for the mainstream media, had taken on a life of its own among veterans and active duty service members. They had seen the news clips, read the articles, and they understood what her superiors had not. Her act of defiance was not one of ego, but of profound respect for the uniform and for every individual who had ever worn it. She became an underground hero. Veterans groups spoke of her stand with reverence. On military forums and social media pages, the image of her stoic face as she was led from the courtroom became a symbol of quiet courage. She began receiving letters, hundreds of them, from soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines around the world. They shared their own stories of being disrespected, of feeling unseen and unvalued by the very society they had sworn to protect. They thanked her for refusing to bow, for reminding them that their honor was not a trifle to be discarded at the whim of a petty official. These letters became her new mission. In the quiet evenings, after a day spent in her bureaucratic exile, she would read them, each one a small ember of validation in the cold darkness of her stalled career. She realized that while the institution had cast her aside, she had found a new command, a new battalion to lead. It was a battalion of the overlooked, the disrespected, the ones who wore their scars, both visible and invisible, with a quiet dignity that Judge Thorne could never comprehend. She began to speak, not in the grand halls of the Pentagon, but in the humble meeting rooms of VFW posts and American Legion halls. She spoke of her experience not with bitterness, but with a calm resolve. She spoke of the importance of standing up for the symbols that bind them together, of the quiet battles for dignity that are fought every day, far from any declared war zone. Her message resonated deeply. She wasn't just a general anymore. She was one of them, a veteran who had faced a different kind of fire and had refused to retreat. Her career, in the traditional sense, was over. The path to more stars on her shoulder had been permanently blocked. But a new path had opened, one that she had never anticipated. It was a path that led not to greater power or prestige, but to a different kind of influence, an influence rooted in shared experience and authentic leadership. She had lost the career she thought she wanted, but she was in the process of discovering the legacy she was truly meant to leave. It was a legacy not defined by rank or title, but by the quiet, unwavering defense of honor. For those who have followed this journey, who have felt the sting of injustice and the warmth of unwavering principle, you understand that some truths are not spoken in loud commands, but are lived in quiet defiance. The story of General Anaya Sharma is a testament to the fact that a career is what you do, but a legacy is what you are. She was stripped of her upward trajectory, her path to the highest echelons of power, but in that loss, she found a voice and a purpose that resonated far beyond the confines of the military institution. Her story became a rallying cry for a community that often feels invisible, a reminder that the defense of honor doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It is a lifelong commitment, a lived truth. If this story resonates with you, if you believe in the power of standing for something, even when the cost is great, then we invite you to join our community. The world is full of stories like this, moments of quiet courage that deserve to be brought into the light. Here at Lived Truths, we are dedicated to sharing them. Subscribe to our channel and become part of a community that understands that the most profound truths are not just told, but lived. Click that subscribe button and help us continue to amplify the voices of those who hold the line, long after the battle is over.